Most churches hand their social media off to whoever has free time, an intern, a volunteer, or the pastor's kid who's pretty good with his phone.
Today, we're making the case for why that approach could actually be costing your church a lot and what it actually looks like to take this role seriously.
Well, hey guys, I'm Thomas.
I'm Shiloh.
And let me start off with a question today for you, Shiloh. How important is social media for churches right now, and why is it important?
It's a big question. I would say that social media is probably a bigger deal than you think.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, it's probably more important than you might initially anticipate. And the churches that are finding success on it are really growing, are really seeing a lot of amazing fruit. And it's important because social media is how, in today's world, churches connect with their community.
Yep.
It's how you reach other people. It's how the word gets out. That's just how it is these days. We just have to accept it.
Yeah.
That no more does the newspaper do letters in the mail work anymore. It is now, or the radio, it is now social media. And so it's important for churches to be able to be successful, I think, and good at connecting with their community, getting people to come to church, to notice their church, and just in general also communicate to people who are at their church and people who might be interested. And it just, I think if we look at the graphs of like growing churches and churches that have successful social media accounts, they're probably very similar looking.
Yep.
It is to, I think it's very hard to grow with the kind of growth of like the really successful churches that we see without also having, a really flourishing social media presence.
But let me unpack a little bit about something I'm working through, kind of the why behind this here. I would encourage churches to reframe the way you think about social media. And if you're my age, I have been an adult for the entire history of social media, all the way back to MySpace. I have been through it all, and I've been through the generations of it and everything. But I think we should reframe the way we think of it as churches as a testimony delivery system. That's really what social media is. I know that sometimes it becomes the wicked stepchild and that kind of stuff, and we dismiss it. It's hard work. It's something that you kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. We hear all this evidence about the way it's rotting people's brains, and it's contributing to, like, people even refer to just scrolling as brain rot sometimes.
Yeah.
For churches, it is a system that we can take advantage of to deliver testimonies to the entire world. And those testimonies look like all the things that churches put on social media. It's photography of people loving one another in your church. It's clips of sermons that are happening. It's people actually sharing their literal testimonies in short form vertical video. It's carousels that tell someone's story or stories of things that are happening at your church. It's a good way for you to deliver testimonies. And I think when we frame it that way, it helps me as a pastor, I know, to just to really remember that we know that testimonies are important. Like we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. We believe that. And so if we reframe it that way, I think it helps me get some right perspective on the idea that this is something that is worth our attention, because it helps churches to get testimonies out to an ever-widening audience if it's done well. That's kind of the way I've been framing it. That's the way I'm talking about it with my social media manager at my church. We had this conversation just yesterday, and I think it's really been a helpful framework to kind of adopt in our church and the way we think about things.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great way to see it. I think for most people, it also is like social media hasn't always been this way. Like we've seen it evolve a lot over the years as well, and how it works and what it succeeds on there and what doesn't. That's actually changed a lot over the years. As you were mentioning, MySpace and stuff like that, like the platforms have changed, the algorithms have changed, the delivery's changed. But even with all that change, it's literally called social media, right? I mean, it's the way that we connect socially with our community nowadays. Now, there's still the other ways too, of course, but I'd say this is kind of like the primary way to do it now. And I think if churches can focus on that and think of it like that, and then put the appropriate time and effort, energy into it, then they can really see how awesome it can be and how it can really help a church grow. Speaking of putting in time and effort and energy, the whole basis, the question around this episode is, should your church hire a social media manager as a staff role, just like you have pastors and maybe someone who's in charge of facilities and stuff like that? Should this be a role that your church should actually invest in on staff? I mean, that's a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll unpack it here in this episode because I have mixed feelings. I'm so full disclosure at my church, and if you guys have followed the podcast at any other time, we're a medium-sized church. I would say about 300 in typical attendance on a normal Sunday. And what I'm finding is that like I wrestle with this because even at a church that's our size, we are we're probably not taking social media as seriously as we want to. And this isn't, if my social media team listens to this episode, I love you guys. I'm thankful for everything you do. But as of right now, we have a 100% volunteer team, but it's been something that I've been talking to our church council about, something that our other directional team pastors and people were talking about this kind of stuff. And as an executive pastor, it's kind of something that I need to lead the charge on is this a role that churches need to fill right now? Now, let me take you back a few years ago where I passionately gave a plea in an early episode of the Reach Right podcast that your church communications director is the most important job in your entire church other than your lead pastor at this point. Now, that was right in the middle of COVID when all you could do was communicate online. And so a communications director was really important. This conversation, I think, goes in the same vein, but I just think social media has risen to that level right now where it is outreach. Like it is one of the primary ways that churches are doing outreach right now. I'm not arguing that it's the same as going to serve at local soup kitchens and those kinds of things, but it is one of the main ways that we deliver invitation into life at our church is happening in social media. So I'm going to, I guess, probably unpack a little bit of some of the reasons why I am leaning now towards investing in this role in an appropriate manner for a church that is our size. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go in this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big thing to say. You know, that's a pretty crazy thing to say. But you know, we're going to get into, because I'm curious on your stance on this. I have some questions for you to back up this claim you're making. Because I think that for most churches, probably if you're listening to this, social media is like a task. You got to check it off,
right? So
you can get on with what you're doing or whatever. You're doing the bare minimum. Just, you know, maybe you've listened to a few of these episodes, you know some things that you should be doing or whatever. But for the most part, when it comes to the priority list of people on church staff and what needs to be accomplished, social media often falls right near the bottom of you know, are we actually going to put attention into this when we have to do all this other stuff? No, we're probably going to prioritize that last. So it doesn't get done very much. You know, we mentioned in the intro a little bit about like, so then you just hand it off to the intern. You just hand it off to the pastor's kid who's a teenager, right? Or something like that. So let's get into a little bit, like, why do you think in the way that social media now works compared to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, does just the intern, just the pastor's kid, that's not a very viable strategy for social media for churches?
Yeah, because I think it's a real skill at this point. Like, just liking to surf Instagram is not a qualification to be a social media person anymore, I feel like. And that's like, and I'll be the first to admit, like 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe like pre-COVID, I would say, that was a lot of churches' approach. Like, oh, that person's young and they seem to be on Instagram a lot or Facebook or whatever it was at the time. And yeah, they'd probably be good to kind of just help us out in a volunteer capacity. So that was the MO. It was easier back then. You could get away with just kind of casually posting things. And that, like, you know, there was a time where everything your church posted was delivered to all of your followers that got onto the platform. But that's not the case anymore. You have to be really intentional and post good things in order for it to reach people that are not yet followers, and then maybe a few of your followers at the same time. So I think that's one thing. And then I've been like, I've seen the light, and I know that it takes a lot of different skills and a lot of time to execute social media well. So two things I'm unpacking there. So let's do the time one first. Like, to actually do social media, we just said in a previous episode, I think last week's episode, we talked about how many posts should a church be doing in a week.
Yeah.
So we're primarily like our foundation for most churches is Instagram over and above YouTube, which I would include in this conversation here too. I think you should treat YouTube like a social media platform also and be putting content on there. But those two channels, and then maybe posting onto Facebook and TikTok and those places as well. I think at a minimum, a church probably needs to do about 4 posts per week. Would be a kind of a good kind of baseline, and not take any weeks off and just always be posting at the same schedule, the same days every single week. I think really healthy churches are doing it daily. So 7 posts a week. So to do this, to do videos and carousels and all the things that it takes to be able to post that amount of content, it's at a minimum several hours per week, if not dozen or dozens of hours. Full disclosure here at REACHRIGHT, Shiloh, like we have a team of like 6 full-time people that just do social media and content creation for social media. That's what we're doing right now. You and I are making content for our YouTube platform and what goes out on our podcast that'll get turned into short form videos. So I know that most churches don't have that kind of budget for teams. We totally get that. So that's just one part of it. It takes a lot of time to just do this. That doesn't even mention like all of the engagement stuff you have to do. So when people comment and having conversations when people do, and asking other questions and just really building out a social platform, it just takes a lot of time. And then the second thing is that it takes a lot of skill at the same time also. So I mentioned we have 6 different like people on our team here at REACHRIGHT. It's made up of like several different roles. We have people that are in videos. We have actual people that are strategists and doing the posting here at REACHRIGHT. We have video editors. We have graphic designers. We have all kinds of different skills. Now, again, I know most churches aren't going to have 5 people on their staff. I would guess that some of the largest churches in the country probably have dedicated full-time people for each platform, and then lots of content help too. My best guess is some of our largest churches have 15 to 25 people working on social media and content by itself. So like, I know that's not reality for most people. For some, the question is whether or not we should invest a little bit of money, perhaps in a part-time job. And I guess it starts to make a little bit more sense when you think about like, it's not just someone who likes to surf Instagram, like, or it's not someone who enjoys brain rot content, right? That it has to be more like someone who has a little bit of skill on how to use something like CapCut or Adobe, or using Canva to create graphics. And they have an eye for those kinds of things, and they're decent at writing captions or maybe using AI to help them with that. There's several different skills that you'll want someone to train on, invest time in, and grow in to be able to do this role. So all of those things together, I know I said a mouthful with all of that. There's several factors that make it seem like just the person kind of taking a try at it who doesn't really have a lot of passion for it or a lot of skill might not be the right choice.
Yeah. I think I think you hit it on the head. I think you're so right about the skill set thing. It's crazy that this is kind of what it's come to, but to succeed on social media, like, it is its own kind of skill now, and it's sort of actually a conglomerate of a lot of different skill sets.
Right.
Just think about the kind of variety of posts that are good for successful churches to post. We have long-form videos that go up on YouTube. We have short-form clips that are going on TikTok and Reels and stuff like that. We got photography for just like a classic Instagram post. Carousels, some of those including text and questions and trying to get people to engage. You have stories on Instagram and Snapchat, stuff like that. So many different kinds of content. And just start to think about, you need someone with experience in like editing, filming, graphic design, like copywriting, and all this kind of stuff. It's actually pretty difficult to do this in a good way. And so it's not just someone who's the youngest person on staff. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
It's not just the youngest person at your church that you should give this to because young people know social media.
Yeah.
It may be true that young people are on social media the most, or maybe have a bit more of their finger on the pulse of kind of what is working right now. That doesn't necessarily mean they have the skill set to actually then translate that into successful posts and all kinds of stuff.
And I'd say this too, Shiloh. Like I think let me kind of add on to that. Like this person, the same arguments I made about the church communication director, other than your pastor, and I would maybe even say in some cases even more than your lead pastor, they are the chief communicator for your church. Like the words that they say are going to be seen certainly by more people than just your pastor, because your pastor's words are seen usually by the people there on Sunday, maybe those that watch on YouTube. And then obviously you're putting out content probably on these social platforms, but people's reach in most cases are much, much larger on social platforms than they are on Sunday. Now, there's a difference in time, like sitting through a 40-minute sermon is different from experiencing, an image with a caption or a 25-second reel or something like that. But as far as the actual number of people reached, this person carries the voice of your church. They carry the voice of God, really is what it is. They're representing Jesus to your community. And so that's just one, like, I don't want to dismiss this. Like when you think about it with that perspective, it's almost insane that we would just say, hey, you're on social media a lot. Why don't you represent our church to the most people in the world? So it's kind of nuts to think about it that way, right?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's about communication.
Yeah.
It's about that, this is going to be a lot of people's first impression of your church is going to be one of these posts or whatever. Yes, in some cases that will technically be your lead pastor because it's like a clip from their sermon. But this person's captioning those things. They're doing putting the text on screen, videos. They're doing the carousel post. They're maybe, they're probably in charge of like the Instagram bio and all that kind of stuff. So when it comes to a communication standpoint, you're so right. They are probably reaching more people than just people who show up on Sunday, which once again is positive. That's what we want.
It's good.
We want that big reach. But that's also why it's so important that you make sure you invest, that this person has the skills and knows what they're doing. You know what I mean? It's not fair to put that on someone who maybe not necessarily is going to be the best at that. Let's get into a little bit about like nowadays. We're talking about this potential role in a church staff. What does this person actually do? Like, what does this job look like?
Yeah. So we're wrestling with this right now. Like what is the job description of the church social media director? So I think first thing is that they own the content calendar for the church. So they are the ones that are responsible for what gets posted, when it gets posted, and what we're actually saying, like what the messaging is for that kind of stuff. So back to what I was saying, this is the primary voice and the primary delivery system for people in the hours outside of just the hour and a half that we're together on a Sunday morning there. So I'd say they own our content calendar and they're responsible for that strategy. So what it means is that they are like investing in learning about what makes good content. So like just posting isn't enough. What you want to be doing is, number one, you want to be looking at what other people are doing. So not in the sense to something that's seen as bad. And I think there's a lot of comparison that happens amongst churches and just people in general when it comes to social media. We see that somebody gets more likes and it kind of makes us feel bad about ourselves. You have to dispel those kinds of things and actually look at people that like other churches and see what they're doing well. And let's celebrate that. Like when we see another church that's reaching a lot of people with really great content, that's a win. That's the gospel getting presented to more people. So that's a good thing. Like we should be celebrating that together. But part of what they're doing is researching what's working. And then here's the thing too, that like, it's kind of another reason why it's not suited for just someone who just like, we just feel like they're young enough to do it. It is a very analytical game. Social media is really analytical. One thing that we encourage churches to do is to measure a few key numbers on each of your social platforms. I'll leave a link to this down in the description. We have something called a social media scorecard that's just a pre-done like Google Sheet where it has all of the social platforms and you can put in your monthly score in a few categories. So it's just a kind of a starting point for you where you can put in, we had this much follower growth and this much reach on Instagram, and it helps you track it. It's color coded so you can see, are we going up or down and those things. So grab that in the description, but it's analytical. And what it does, like what you should do, part of your process is, at least on a weekly basis, go back in, take a look at the posts that you've done and see, hey, what worked? I noticed that when we did this announcement post about there not being youth group this week, that did really poorly. But when we did this carousel of people coming up out of the water from baptism, we noticed that did really well. So start to like, it's kind of nebulous because it's social media and they don't tell you this did well because it was photos of real people experiencing authentic joy. Like, you have to deduce some of those kinds of things. And sometimes the things you take a guess at, you turn out to be wrong. But the way you think about it is that every single post is a giant test to see, is this going to work and is it not? And I got to tell you, like, anybody who says they've cracked the code, that this is the secret to always go viral every time you post, well, they wouldn't be telling you that, and they would be just focusing on making their own viral posts and making tons of money doing it. So, like, I can tell you that we put out posts all the time where I think this is going to be a home run. We'll do a video maybe that, like, man, we killed this one. It's edited. Chef's kiss, it was so perfect, and then crickets. We just don't get anything on it. So there's no like perfect recipe, but you do start to see patterns emerge. Like, when we post these kinds of things, we tend to do better. When we post this kind of stuff, it doesn't perform as well. So every post is a test, and as you lean into that, that's the kind of thing that a social media manager is going to have to do, is to be looking at the analytics every week and not just going out and creating content with no care as to what works and what doesn't. Yeah, totally.
I agree. I mean, it's like we're saying, like, it's more in depth than you would imagine. It's
right.
There's a lot more stuff than you would think. And I think you've mentioned before on the podcast, like, social media is kind of just testing. Like, it's like a lot of A and B testing. It's a lot of, we're going to try these two kinds of posts. After a month, let's see which one did better. We're going to try this kind of stuff. Which one kind of succeeds more? And then let's take a look. Which one does better? Let's start to, narrow down, do more similar posts like this. Can we identify what it is about this that is actually being successful and stuff? Here's what I would suggest. It can't just be like this. You can't just go on ChatGPT and say, give me a great social media strategy, and then take what it said and then just do that every week for the rest of, for years. Like, it's going to evolve. It's going to change. You're going to learn things. And if you're not taking a look at the numbers and you're not adapting, then nothing is going to change. Even if ChatGPT said this kind of post every Monday, and then you do that every Monday for years, but it's not actually moving the needle, like, you're just wasting time.
Yes.
And so someone in this role is going to be in charge of taking a look at these numbers, taking a look at these posts and things, and how can we improve? What can we cut out? Stuff like that. Exactly what you're saying.
Let me say this though. Like, I agree. Like, a bad prompt on AI, Claude or ChatGPT or whatever, is write my church a social media strategy. Make no mistakes. That's not a good good prompt to put in there.
Yeah.
What I actually am seeing results, like, and this is again a great thing for a social media manager to do, is what AI is great at is processing data and getting insights that we probably can't see because there's so much data to be looked at. So one thing that you can do, like we do this all the time here at REACHRIGHT for our YouTube videos, this video will be part of our data set at some point. We will take a look at all those, and we have AI process what videos did well, what videos didn't, which videos for YouTube. The main metric you look at is watch time is the most important thing. So we'll usually use that as our primary, and we're constantly testing. We've learned over the years that for us, how-to titles, they do much better than should titles. Like, you should do this. Is worse than here's how to do this. So we've learned that because over and over again, the results keep showing that that's what gets more people to spend more time watching our content on stuff. So the way that we discovered that, though, is by downloading all of our information, and you can do this on all the major social channels. You can download all of your last posts, how many views they got, what kind of engagement numbers they got, and all those things. Get all that into Claude or to ChatGPT, have it do a deep dive on that and pull out some insights for you. And a lot of times it will help you find some of those discoveries that you wouldn't be able to see on your own, that these kinds of captions did well. Now, it's not great usually at processing what was the imagery in that particular post that you did, but there are some things you can glean that it'll probably be able to help you with. So yeah, that's just kind of a point of clarity on what AI could be useful for in this area. Yeah. It's not great at making content by itself. It is a good tool and a helper to make content. We can talk more about that probably in a future episode, but it is something that, yeah, I do see churches and social media managers using that some.
Yeah, that's good. Another thing that you may not have thought about either is that this person's in charge of engagement. Yes. So when people comment or DM or whatever, this person's in charge of responding to them. And this goes back to our earlier point of like, you don't maybe necessarily want that to just be the 19-year-old in your congregation that you know. But, you want it to be someone who's going to be responding thoughtfully and maybe even encouraging like a continuation of that conversation, stuff like that. Even just responding to every comment on a post, on a YouTube video, whatever, like that does great. Like that really boosts you.
It really does. It's crazy.
On these platforms. Even if you can't think of anything really important to respond, just like, sounds great. Thanks for sharing. Even something as small as that, just respond to each of the comments, like really can boost things.
Yeah.
And
no, we
do that.
That should be a policy. So, I think every church should have that policy. I think that, I guess there's a point. I don't know that maybe Elevation Church needs to respond to all 9,000 comments they get on every single post that they do. But I think for the common church, for my church, for your church, for anybody that has a few thousand followers on the top end, I would say, make it your goal to do that, to comment on every single other person that comments on your posts there. And what it does is it starts to build engagement. Here's a secret we've picked up is that you want to comment with clarifying questions a lot of times. If someone has like a genuine comment, hey, why did you say this in your reel? Or, they have a pushback on something you said, even if they're not a part of your church, and they're wondering, why did you say that in your message in that sermon reel I just watched? Respond with another comment. That makes them try to comment back. Again, use some care if they're being really negative on things and really criticizing. Yeah. That the best thing to do is just delete on those when you have the power over the platform. But if there's a real genuine question, keep the conversation going. Don't just answer and let it rest there. So comment response is really huge. I think that you want to do it in a timely manner too. So that's not a once a week kind of a job. Like on Saturdays, I go in and comment on everything we got over the last week. Well, that post is totally stale if it went out on Monday and you're comment responding on Saturday. So you need to be on top of those kinds of things. Yep. I think kind of as far as a line, so we do it here at REACHRIGHT still, and I'd say we average on all of our platforms probably about between 50 and 100 comments a day, and we have part of our social media team here at REACHRIGHT just responds to comments. So actually, I think we got a comment about you in a previous episode just today, Shiloh, that I really appreciated. They said, who did they say you looked like?
The guy from Blue's Clues.
The guy from Blue's Clues. Let us know in the comments if he needs to wear a green striped shirt for our Halloween episode this time. And let me know if you think Shiloh looks like the guy from Blue's Clues. And I was so proud of our team. I respond to a lot of the comments when they're more technical about things, but when they're jokes or people making fun of Shiloh's looks, we let our team respond to those kinds of comments. And I think he just said, we'll let wardrobe know or something like that, because that's a whole part of our team, right, Shiloh? We have our wardrobe department on our social media team.
Of course. We go see them
right before we record. Right before makeup.
Yes. Right before we record a podcast, we have a whole team actually behind the camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a trailer. No, just kidding. No, that comment was actually mostly positive. They were like, hey, great content, love the video. Yeah. And then they were just like, side note.
Yeah.
When you wear a green striped shirt, you look a lot like the guy from Blue's Clues. Just wanted to let you know.
Perfect.
So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I've never actually gotten that before, but now I can't unsee it. So really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. No, actually, no, that's fun. But talking about this role, and we're pointing out all these things that maybe our listeners have never even thought about when it comes to social media managers and the importance of what they can be doing. let's talk a little bit about, okay, what does the reality of hiring one of these look like when it comes to hours, when it comes to pay? I mean, what are you sort of picturing? You're talking about having this conversation within, as an executive pastor of our church, like, let's get, real about this. Let's not, obviously reveal anything private, but like, what does this actually reasonably look like for churches?
Yeah, if you've decided this is something we should invest in, the question obviously is how much should we invest in this? So ZipRecruiter, we did some studies on this, and we have done a lot of pastoral and church compensation content.
Yes.
We actually, I have so many tools you can use. We have a calculator that you can figure out what a fair church compensation looks like for all kinds of church roles. So that would be a first stop for you, as you can look at that. I think communications director or social media stuff is some of the options that are on there. So take a look at that. The average on this, and this is obviously very wide in its range. It's going to be different if you're in Silicon Valley, California versus Little Rock, Arkansas. But $65,000 a year is the average for a full-time social media manager at a church or at a business or any kind of place like that. So that's kind of the averages across the board, $65,000 a year. I know churches enough to know that it probably takes a church of about 800 to 1,000 people where that would start to be something that would make sense or something you could start to consider. Perhaps you have more vision. Perhaps this is something that you really want to lean into. Like, I think I could justify and maybe make a case that investing in that full time and really nailing our social media would be a good investment, even at that kind of an investment level there. I understand the reality, though, for most churches is that's probably not in the cards. My church is 300 people. I would feel strange investing there. Like, we have a youth pastor that's full-time and a services director and a few full-time pastors. But that's something that we haven't taken the leap on yet. Instead, what we're thinking about, and I would think what most churches are kind of like a quarter to half-time kind of a role. So we're thinking about something kind of like half-time is what we were hoping to do. To that end, I would say, like, the going rate on that is probably around that $20 to $25 an hour is what you'd be looking at for something like that. So if you figured on something like 20 hours a week at your church, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1,200 a month is what that investment would look like. In 20 hours a week, could someone be effective at this role? I think so. I think someone could probably post daily on the 4 primary platforms. Again, just to list them off, it's YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, posting on those 4 platforms. You're probably not going to do unique posts for each one, but you'll cross-post your videos on those platforms. They could probably do that daily. If some of the days, it's not video every day, but it's, some days it's still graphics, some days it's a carousel, maybe once or twice a week it's a video. I think 20 hours a week is really reasonable for something like that. But you'd have to find the right generalist who's pretty good at doing Canva and pretty good at using CapCut or Premiere or editing in the TikTok app, maybe in some cases. I don't really care what they're good at exactly, what tools they use, but just it has to be someone who has a general aesthetic and is able to do some of these kinds of different things. So that's realistic. For a church under 100 people, though, I know that that's probably not like a reality. Maybe you can swing, if you maybe have around 100 people, a 1/4 time, someone giving 10 hours a week, something like that. That's an opportunity for you there. But I think a lot of those churches are leaning on volunteers to do this kind of stuff. And that's really, it's one of those things that's always the challenge is we lack for resources a lot of times in our smaller churches. And you have to do these things to figure it out. So saying all that, if this sounds daunting to you, I do have another solution. So we do have a service that we offer here at REACHRIGHT. And the point of this podcast isn't necessarily to pitch our services necessarily, but I think it just makes so much sense here. We have services that post 7 times a week that are about half the price of the numbers that we're talking about here, because we have a team of professionals that are actually able to do this, and they really do everything without the church having to lift a finger. It's better if you can like get some decent photography into like a Google Drive or something for us. But like really, like our team can take it from there. All you'd have to do is kind of give us your feedback along the way as you see fit. But the great thing is because we have all these different team members, we have full-time video editors and full-time graphic designers and full-time content writers. And it's how you started actually, Shiloh, with us is you did that. And we have strategists and posters and all these different people on our team. We're able to kind of get some economies of scale on stuff there. So for the church that maybe has less, we have things that start right around $500 a month that will get you into that consistent kind of a presence that you can be really proud of. So that is an option for some churches. I think if you have the people in-house there to do it, sometimes that's just kind of authentically better. But if that's just something that you've tried before and it doesn't work, we have some people that can help you with that kind of stuff. We'd love to talk. I'll leave a link to that down in the description if you want to learn more there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think outsourcing it, it's a complete possibility. I think that's totally reasonable to be thinking about, whether it's us or not or whatever. That's also something, you know what I mean, to think about. But it's true for most churches and average church size or whatever, that finding someone on team or whatever to possibly do it, getting someone on board, could be really awesome. And even, one of the best things is like someone can grow in this position too. They don't have to be an expert at the beginning. You know what I mean? Yeah. We have the benefit of that. Our team, like you said, has been doing a lot of this stuff for a year. So that's really cool. Yeah. That the person who's going to edit your social media videos, if you do it with us, like they've been doing that for years. Yeah. But it's also cool that like someone on your team or whatever can grow in this position as they continue to get better and better. And, you can point them towards some of our videos and podcasts. And
that's exactly
we have advice. We have advice and stuff to help grow in these spaces as well.
It's funny, Shiloh. So I was telling you, I was meeting with my social media director at the church here, and I kept finding myself wanting to say, you know what, like, you really need just to watch this video that we did, or this podcast episode, or this video I've done on, social media. I think I shared one of yours where you talked about the 4 post types that are working best right now. We had another one about how to convert one sermon into 42 different pieces of content. And so we make tons of content to equip your social media director. So let us be the trainers. You can we have a whole playlist we have set up on YouTube for social media skills and those things. Start there, and we're happy to help, whether professionally or just using our content. We want to be a service to your churches there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think with how important this is becoming, and honestly has been for a while, the question maybe isn't just like, should we get this person on staff or not? It's more like, what form can this take with our resources and our size and our budget and all that kind of stuff? What can we do? I think it can no longer be something we push off to the side. Even if it's not a full-time person or whatever, it might look different, a little bit different than that. This still needs to be a consideration. That's kind of the point. You know what I mean? Like this needs to have some kind of form, some kind of plan, whether or not it's a volunteer or a fully dedicated person or a paid position or whatever it is. This can't just be something that remains at the bottom of this totem pole, because it actually, when it succeeds and when it does good and when you grow, like it's growing everything. Like it's growing all these other places as well, right? When this social media stuff succeeds. So,
yeah, I think you're right. I think that sometimes the reality is, for many churches, it just has to be a volunteer, because there's no funds to invest in this. And I do not want to sound dismissive of that whatsoever. I think that is that's great. And we love volunteers here at REACHRIGHT. And I hope our content is helpful for church volunteers all the time too. Let us know in the comments if you are a volunteer or a church staff member. I'd love to hear kind of a breakdown on some of those things. But yeah, that's just the reality, is that's just what it is. So just know that the reason why it's so hard is that it is a grind. Like, to do this for a couple of weeks is one thing, but so many volunteer opportunities at church are like just little sprints, I guess you would say. Like, so I go and I'm going to be on the worship team. And so I'm going to get up early on Sunday and be there, and I'm there for 3.5 hours, and it's tiring, but I'm done after 3.5 hours. But this is This is a grind every single week. And so prayerfully consider that as you're considering maybe volunteering or asking a volunteer to step into this role. It is really important. And I just want you to hear that. If you are a volunteer in this, so I preached on this last Sunday, and it's like close to my heart right now. It's the words from 1 John communicating to a younger church that was in Ephesus, most likely. His encouragement to younger Christians, people that are maybe the volunteers in the story, although I think you're probably great Christians if you're doing this. One of his encouragements is to know that you are strong. Like, it's going to take the Holy Spirit inside of you to do this kind of a role the way that it needs to be done here. It is not just a technical role. It's not just a recreational role. It's hard, but like with the Holy Spirit inside of you, you are strong and you can do these kinds of things. So I hope that's an encouragement to you. 1 John chapter 2, I think it was verse 2 or 3 or 4, kind of in that range right there. So you are strong. You young men is who he's talking to in that part right there. So.
Well, I can't really end on anything as motivating as that. So thank you for the encouragement. And yeah, we just really, we're putting out a lot of social media content these days, guys. So we got a ton more videos and podcasts and stuff to help out your social media managers and to help equip you guys with this stuff. But we got a ton of great content coming up in the next few weeks. So subscribe and whatever it takes, you know what I mean, to make sure that you get alerted when we post that new stuff. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. If you need help on your social media, use that link down below. We'll talk to you later.